Good evening, everyone. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we're talking Bills' contract situation for the offensive line, and we take a quick look ahead to the college football season 2025 and what offensive line prospects have our eye. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
good evening, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Air Raid Hour presented to you by the Cover One Network and Picasso's Pizza. I am your host, Tilt Money, tonight, as Judge is still waiting for his computer to be fixed from his school. He hopefully will be back with us next week as we continue our summer scouting series, and we will be continuing that series tonight again, talking offensive line. But for tonight, we're actually going to be talking about the interior offensive line, and that would be the center and guard positions tonight. So last week we did linebacker. The week before that, to start our series, we did running back. Tonight, we're going to go through another 10 prospects between guards and centers. 30 prospects covered here in our summer scouting series over the first couple episodes. And yeah, it's definitely giving us a leg up on the cycle for next year. Certainly has piqued my attention. It's for some certain players that I have kind of otherwise maybe not have piqued my eye. So really, happy about that. And next week, we'll probably wrap up our summer scouting series with looking at wide receiver. Would be my assumption right now is the position that we would take a look at next week. And hopefully Judge will be back with us next week as well. So, but for tonight, taking a look at offensive line. What does that mean for the Bills? Training camp's about a month away from where we are right now. And the offensive line, wow, this has been a steady and really, really good unit for the Bills the last couple years, relatively free of injuries. They obviously have made big news in the offseason, last offseason, when they gave Spencer Brown the big contract extension. So let's talk about, before we get into the college prospect setups we've done each time in this series, the contract situation for the Bills offensive line and what that looks like beyond 2025. So let's take a look. We're going to kind of, again, stay away a little bit from the tackle position tonight as the really areas of focus, especially as we get into talking about the prospects, at least, will be on the guards and centers. So you got Deion Dawkins, who's under contract for the Bills through 2027, comes in unrestricted free agent. He's got a couple void years starting in 2028, but Bills still have Deion Dawkins under contract through 2027, so another 2 years beyond this upcoming season. Next on the list, Spencer Brown, another one on the bookend from Deion Dawkins, under contract through 2028. After that extension that he signed during the offseason last year, Spencer Brown under contract at the tackle position. Other tackles, Ryan Vandemark, he is a restricted free agent come the end of 2025. So TBD on what the Bills will do with Ryan Vandemark. Tylen Grable, who the Bills drafted a year ago, under contract through 2027 as well, along with Travis Clayton, who they also drafted a year ago as part of the International Players Program. Richard Garage is still under contract through 2026, and he becomes an exclusive rights free agent after 2026. Osiris Torrance, as we start going into the interior of the line. Great film room, by the way. Shameless plug from Anthony and Eric with Cybo. Osiris Torrance under contract through 2026, but that's it. So will remain to be seen what the Bills do with Osiris Torrance as far as a contract situation. Would love to see an extension for him at some point. I think he's earned it, and maybe that's something that will come next off season, as he is still under contract through 2026, becoming an unrestricted free agent in 2027. Cedric Van Pran Granger at the pivot, Bills draft pick from a year ago, under contract through 2027. So he, maybe the heir apparent to this next guy, Connor McGovern, who's going to be a big focal point for the Bills' success this year, but also only under contract for this season. So this is a big one. And this is, again, why we are going to be talking about offensive line a bit tonight, because a guy like Connor McGovern, who has really lived up to and probably beyond what his contract really was. And maybe at the time, if you kind of try to rewind, there were some people probably who thought at the time that the Connor McGovern contract was a little bit out of left field. But honestly, it's become such a bargain for the Bills. But now what do they do with Connor McGovern beyond 2025? He's an unrestricted free agent 2026. Do they try to get a contract extension done here, maybe sometime during training camp before the season starts, to kind of put him in the mix for term beyond 2025? Do they let Connor McGovern play out this contract, and knowing they have Cedric Van Pran Granger, who they drafted a year ago, are they comfortable with maybe what that future could look like with Cedric Van Pran Granger manning the pivot? We don't know. And that's another reason why we're going to really talk about a couple centers tonight in college football, because Connor McGovern is the big question mark on this offensive line beyond 2025 as far as contract situation is concerned. And then you have David Edwards, who is the starting left guard, who is also an unrestricted free agent after 2025. So you have your left guard, your starting left guard, and your starting center, both unrestricted free agents after the end of 2025. And that's kind of led us to now why we think it's important to start talking about especially the interior of that Bills offensive line and what that could look like beyond 2025 with two big names. I say big because these have been, two starters the last 2 years on this offensive line. And so it's an interesting situation for the Bills, because obviously they've gotten really great consistency out of this offensive line group for the past couple years, but are some question marks now beyond 2025 on a position group that we really haven't had to put a lot of focus on as far as the draft is concerned when we've talked about this group the last couple years. But now, just like linebacker a week ago, didn't talk about linebacker a ton in this 2025 draft. We didn't really talk about offensive line a ton either in this 2025 draft, and we will talk about it for the 2026 draft, and we'll get to that in just a second. RJ says, I think they can get better at center, but you just never know. They can. Look, Connor McGovern is not the best center in the NFL, but there is a case to be made. He's probably a top 10 center, and for a fit for what the Bills have, the familiarity with Josh Allen. We said the same kind of things about Mitch Morse when he left, and Connor McGovern kind of seamlessly slid in to that pivot. I don't think the Bills have that right now on the roster, whereas like Connor McGovern was your starting left guard, and then he kind of slid over into the pivot once Mitch Morse left. You don't really have that right now on the roster. It's an unproven young player in Cedric Van Pran Granger. So what will happen there? RJ also says, I hope we can get McGovern taken care of. And I agree. Music Blogger 87 comes in. That's says hopefully they can sign both Torrance and McGovern. And I mean, look, yeah, I'm with you on that one as well. So certainly hope they do that. So before we start talking about some of the prospects in college football for this year, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
What's up, y'all? Khalil Shakir here. When I want Buffalo pizza, it's got to be Picasso's.
Khalil Shakir. Your team, our pizza. Picasso's. This is Buffalo Pizza.
That's Picasso'sPizza.net. Order online for Picasso'sPizza.net. Have that great pizza delivered right to your home, or go to 4 of the greater Buffalo area locations for that great classic cup and char pepperoni. That's at Picasso'sPizza.net. And I should have actually mentioned before we move on to the college prospects, there are 2 guys I forgot to mention there, and that's Alec Anderson, who has been a kind of a utility depth player along with Ryan Vandemark on that line, who is also a restricted free agent come 2026, along with Ryan Vandemark. Alec Anderson and Vandemark kind of following a similar path in their Bills careers, and similar again from a contract perspective as well at the end of 2025, both restricted free agents. And then you've got Chase Lunt, who the Bills drafted this past year. So obviously he's got that sort of baked in 4-year rookie deal, and he's with the team through 2028. You do have a couple other guys, Mike Edwards, Kendrick Green, who and Rush Reimer, who is on the roster and technically is under contract through 2027. That's your rounding out of the offensive line for the Buffalo Bills. And we'll see kind of what happens, right? Again, with the contract situation for these guys as we head into the end of this season. But as we start to talk about this upcoming season with training camp right around the corner, college football also right around the corner, and tonight we're going to talk prospects from the interior offensive line, and we're going to cover about 10 prospects tonight, some guards and a few centers, and I'm going to just throw out another few names as well as we get to the end of the show that I didn't really do deep dives on, but other guys just to keep an eye on this year in college football. Offensive line is not always the easiest to keep track of, but these are guys that should have your attention as some of the top prospects on the interior offensive line heading into college football this season. So let's just start right off the bat with some guards. First player on the list is a player that from Texas A&M. We've been covering a lot of Texas A&M players seemingly on these last couple summer scouting shows, and that's ARH Reed Adams, the guard from Texas A&M. Played right guard in 2024 after playing left guard and some right tackle in 2023 at 6'5", 330 pounds. Could have a similar build to Osiris Torrance at right guard position, and potentially play the left side should David Edwards not be brought back in 2026. So a guy that has experience playing both right guard and left guard. This guy wasn't a huge recruit coming out of high school, and did spend his first 2 seasons at Kansas as a Jayhawk before he transferred to Texas A&M a year ago. So he'll be finishing out his career at Texas A&M this year. He really cemented that right guard position for A&M and returns for his final season to kind of continue to refine his skills. On a Texas A&M offensive line, returns every single offensive line starter. That's ARH Reed Adams from Texas A&M, with maybe a little more to prove this year as he continues his ascension after being just a 3-star recruit out of high school, and is widely considered one of the top guards in this upcoming class. So that's ARH Reed Adams from Texas A&M. And we've got a comment here. I'm okay with offensive guard center at the bottom of round 1, even if we do sign Torrance and McGovern. Edwards is a free agent. Exactly. And that's what we talked about in the first segment before the commercial break. is that we do have David Edwards as a unrestricted free agent going into next year, and along with McGovern. So it's like you'd like to lock up maybe McGovern to at least ensure some stability for 2026, but that does still leave you an opening at left guard, no matter sort of what you do. Presuming that the Bills don't bring back David Edwards, because I shouldn't say it's impossible, but I would say I think it would be unlikely that you see both McGovern and Edwards back. I would love that to keep some continuity there, but I'm not sure that that will happen. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that's a good point from Music Blogger 87. Next up on the list is the player who is on our show graphic for tonight, and that's Caden Green, the guard out of Mizzou. Left guard exclusively in 2023 and 2024. Started all 13 games at left guard for Mizzou in 2024 at 6'5", 320 pounds. Really fits in, really fits in well as far as archetype fit for what a guy like Aaron Cromer might look like. NFL Draft Buzz has Caden Green as their number one offensive guard prospect for this upcoming draft. PFF has him as their number 2 offensive guard prospect and their number 55 overall prospect. By the way, Armaj Reed Adams was PFF's number 28 overall prospect. So some decently high ranked players overall, at least right now. And again, these rankings change quite a bit from PFF, especially from now until the start of next season. And they do a really good job. And, talk about their grading system or whatever, and not to digress too much here, but they do a really good job of letting you see through their different stages of the off season, PFF that is, what their rankings have been for college prospects. So when you go on to PFF's website, you can actually filter for different stages of the offseason to see where guys were ranked, before the season, after bowl season, after the combine, and they do a really good job of kind of showing that, which I find pretty useful there to kind of see how guys move around. So that's Caden Green. Transfer from Oklahoma in 2023, now at Mizzou, 24 career games played to this point. The presumption is that he's going to continue to play left guard at Mizzou in 2025. And again, with David Edwards not under contract for 2026, Green becomes a very interesting option potentially for the Bills on day 2 of the draft. And as I mentioned, he started all 13 games at left guard in 2024. So Caden Green, a name to keep an eye on the offensive line. The next guy up is a guard from Alabama, Jaden Roberts. NFL Draft Buzz and PFF both have Roberts as their offensive guard 3 overall, with PFF having Roberts listed as their 61st overall prospect as of right now. So just a hair behind a guy like Caden Green, still kind of firmly in that late round 2, early round 3 discussion as of right now. Played right guard exclusively in 2023 and 2024, while at Bama started 12 games in 2024, earning recognition for both the Lombardi and Outland Trophy watch lists and establishing himself on that Alabama offensive line. He's been praised over the course of his career for his ascending development each year, a guy that's really taken a step each year, including having demonstrated some technical refinements as well, which is something that I'm sure will pique Aaron Cromer's interest. 6'5", 310. His build is similar to that of a David Edwards, and the main concern for a guy like Jaden Roberts going into 2025 is he does have a pretty lengthy injury history, so we'll see how he fares this season as he kind of finishes off his collegiate career at Alabama, and likely becomes a day 2 pick in next year's draft. So Jaden Roberts, a guy to keep your eye on at Alabama. Continuing with the SEC trend and continuing with a program that the Bills are quite familiar with, and that's Roderick Kearney from Florida. Bills obviously comfortable drafting Florida players early in the drafts. We've seen Kaiir Elam. We talked about Osiris Torrance. So here's another guard from Florida, Roderick Kearney, a little bit smaller player than Osiris Torrance at 6'4", 307. This is a guy who hasn't played a ton of offensive snaps for the Gators thus far in his career and will be stepping into presumably a starting role finally this year for the Gators. He's been a good special teams player. He's been on the field goal block units for Florida. He's going to have a chance to start this season. Where will they slot him in on that offensive line? NFL Draft Buzz has Kearney quite high, actually, in their offensive guard rankings as their OG 5, whereas PFF has them as their OG 9 and 193rd overall prospects. So some divergence a little bit on what Kearney, how Kearney stands right now, but I don't think anyone really knows because he hasn't really played a ton of meaningful offensive snaps thus far. But certainly a name worth watching and paying attention to as he steps into a role this year, especially given the Bills' history with the program. Obviously, Osiris Torrance coming from Florida at the same position. The Bills have had, like I mentioned, they drafted guys early in Elam and Torrance from this program. They've also drafted other guys later in the draft, like Justin Shorter and Voshon Joseph in the past from Florida. So they're very comfortable with players from Florida. RJ says, I think this draft, we need to go almost all offense coming up. We need a wide receiver 1, maybe a left guard, future center, running back, and then probably a safety. And it's very interesting, right? How kind of the economy of the two drafts, presumably from 2025 to 2026 could be different. 2025 felt like a year where we really had to go heavy on the defense, and we did. 2026 could end up being the opposite, where they go back the other way and go more on the offensive side of the ball. The 2024 draft, with Keon Coleman, Ray Davis, Dwayne Carter, that was a bit more of a balanced draft where the Bills kind of split offense and defense. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It does seem like maybe heading into 2026, especially as we've talked about so far. We talked about running backs in the very first summer scouting show we did. That looks like it's going to be a need. I wouldn't expect James Cook to be back in 2026. And it could be that wide receiver again becomes a need for the Bills, depending on what they end up doing with Curtis Samuel in the last year of his deal. We know Josh Palmer's here for 3 years. And we'll see if Keon Coleman can take a step in 2025 to kind of maybe push wide receiver down the priority list of needs come 2026, but we just don't know yet. So offense does look like it's going to be something the Bills will need to kind of take a look at for the 2026 draft. Music Blogger says wide receiver, OG center, and running back. Yeah, I mean, can't argue that right now. I think, like I said, next week's summer scouting show, as we wrap up the summer scouting series, we'll probably take a look at wide receivers. So that'll be an exciting one as we head into sort of the end of the summer scouting series as we get into the July month before training camp and before the Air Raid Hour summer break, which is coming up starting June 30th. And I'll mention more about that sort of at the end of the show. And Judge will kind of mention that as well on the different social medias a bit later. So that's Roderick Kearney from Florida is the last guy we talked about. Next guy up is an interesting one. Tomas Rematch from Virginia Tech. I think it's Rematch. This is a guy who spent his first 4 seasons at West Virginia and now transfers to Virginia Tech for his final year of eligibility. Has over 1,600 snaps at left guard over the past 2 seasons. That was at West Virginia, including 935 snaps at left guard in 2024. PFF's offensive guard 4 and 122nd overall prospect. He's 6'6", 317. So again, seemingly in the mold of an archetype of an Aaron Cromer build that he could work with at that left guard position, very similar to a David Edwards. Finishing out, like I said, his final season of eligibility here at Virginia Tech. I would be interested and would assume that the Hokies are going to keep him at left guard. I wouldn't expect anything else given his experience from the past few years. In 2024 at West Virginia, started all 13 games, was named All Big 12 honorable mention, 78.6 PFF overall grade in 2024, ranked fifth among Power 4 guards. And he was one of only six in that group who earned a 75 plus grade as a pass blocker and a run blocker. And as I mentioned, 935 snaps on that offensive line. So Tomas Rimac, I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name yet, will be someone from Virginia Tech who I'm going to be really interested to see. Now he comes to the ACC conference. I'm, right in my backyard. So we'll kind of see how that one plays out right there. The next guy is a really interesting one, and obviously he's at a big time program, and that's Vega Ione, the guard from Penn State, goes by Vega. Started all 16 games in 2024 for Penn State at left guard, blocking obviously for guys like Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, who we talked about. Both of those guys in our running back show at 6'4", 334. He's a bit bigger than what the Bills have had at left guard, but he's really kind of in that same mold as an Osiris Torrance, but on the left side. Would really match that kind of beef opposite of Torrance and give the Bills like two legitimately powerful dudes at the guard positions if they wanted to go that way. PFF's offensive guard 6 and 142nd overall prospect as of this summer. This guy is one of 9 siblings. He grew up with a very crowded household, made the journey from Polynesia, I believe it was, to Washington. And so, nope, I'm getting my guys mixed up here. That was thinking of the center from Oregon. So disregard that. Mixing up 2 different notes, but he is one of 9 siblings and playing at a premier program at Penn State. Vega Ione, an interesting guy to keep an eye on as well. So those are 6 guards to keep your eye on. Now we're going to talk about 4 centers to keep your eyes on as we head into this season, because we want to mix it up here. And, obviously center is still a concern for 2026. Hope they get a deal done with McGovern, but we don't know. Guard, obviously a concern, especially left guard. And so we'll start talking about a few centers here as well before we wrap up the show tonight. First guy on the list, the consensus number 1 center right now on a lot of people's boards, and that's Jake Slaughter from Florida, another Florida offensive lineman. I kind of talked again about how the Bills are very comfortable with guys from this program. NFL Draft Buzz and PFF both have him as their center number 1 heading into this college football season. PFF currently has Slaughter as their 15th overall prospect. So kind of in that realm of a Linderbaum, of a Bradbury of years past, right? And maybe even a little higher than those guys from years past. At 6'5", 308. If the Bills were to lose McGovern in free agency, he could slide right in and into the pivot right there. What stands out beyond his accolades have been his progression, right? From taking over the starting center job from midway through his freshman season to not looking back right now. Pretty incredible, actually. And it's funny, NFL Draft Bus compares him physically to Cedric Van Granger, among a few others, but it's just interesting that they have that comp for him. Pass blocking grade jumped from 75.9 from 2023 to 83.9 in 2024. His run blocking also improved to a 79.0 that ranks 7th nationally among centers. 3-time SEC academic honor roll as well. So you know that this guy has the intellectual football IQ side that he's going to bring to the game calling out the protections, making the adjustments at the line. Jake Slaughter, as it stands right now, the consensus number one center coming up in this year's draft. And Ralph Wilson Sr. says McGovern replacing Morris was a catalyst for this O-line being one of the best. Bean had to go get him in free agency because an inexperienced center for Josh is not ideal. I see him getting sent. I love this comment. And I agree. And I'm hoping the more that we speak this into existence, it actually happens and it does get spoken into existence. Really would love to see McGovern extended. I think that it's not being talked about a lot right now this summer. Obviously, James Cook has been the focal point of summer discussion so far, and other kind of off-field stuff like Josh Allen's wedding and different things of that nature. What is Keon Coleman going to do in year? But like, to be honest, like, to me, Connor McGovern extension like is as high up on the importance of a talking point as there really can be. And I understand for 2025 it might not matter, but like, do you want this guy to be playing on an expiring contract in 25 and letting him walk? Like, I would love to see them get, again, a deal done for him during training camp before the season started. If they can make that happen, I would be thrilled for that. And I love that comment there from Ralph Wilson Sr. Next up on the center list, we've got Ipani Alalulu from Oregon, and he is both PFF and NFL Draft Buzz's number 2 center heading into this season. PFF has him as their 49th overall prospect. Just feels like Oregon year after year just churns out athletic offensive line prospects, and it's not just at one position on the offensive line. It's across the board. It's centers, it's guards, it's tackles. It's just, if you're a high school player and you have some athletic chops and you want to go to a program that's going to, one, let you display those chops and sort of put you in a position to have fun while playing offensive line and set you up potentially to be an NFL drafted player. I mean, Oregon, that program really knows what they're doing with offensive line. So give them a lot of credit there. 6'2", 325. He's a little shorter, but athletically just very, very much going to get the job done. Allowed 0 sacks as a sophomore and has been praised for his blend of power and technical refinement. So he's heading into his junior season, Lalu is, and he's the only returning starter on that Ducks offensive line. So really played well as a sophomore. Now is going to kind of be taking a leadership mantle as a junior, as the only returning starter on the Ducks offensive line. An interesting season ahead for a guy like Lalulu because he can really vault himself up, I think, draft boards if he plays well. And NFL Draft Plus compares him physically to a guy like Zach Frazier, who has been really good for the Steelers thus far. And so, yeah, big fan of his, and probably right now the guy that I'm really honing in on as a potential option for the Bills should they be interested in the center in next year's draft on like day 2. Seems like a good spot for this guy right now. Like, this could change obviously, but the center 2 probably going to go maybe a little bit earlier than we think, assuming these rankings sort of don't change a ton. We'll see if these center rankings change a lot, but that's Ipani Lalulu from Oregon as a cool guy to keep your eye on this year. Again, from a program that just constantly puts guys out. Next player is Connor Liu, center from Auburn. NFL Draft Buzz and PFF's center 3, both heading into the season. PFF has Liu as their 54th overall prospect. Praise for athleticism, right? 6'3", 302. He's entering his 3rd year as a starting center for Auburn. Trajectory has seen him ascend each year. He's been the starter midway through his freshman year, and he's really never looked back. Connor Liu from Auburn, just there's more there for him as well, I think, to improve and to continue the trajectory he's on, right? So I think that he's an interesting name because he's a center 3, so he's certainly not he's certainly not being balked at, but potentially could kind of put his name into the mix as being maybe possibly an outside chance as the best center in this upcoming class. So we'll see how he plays out this season at Auburn. You would presume that he's going to declare for the draft in 2026. So that's Connor Lew, great athlete from Auburn. And the last guy we're really going to talk about in depth tonight is Parker Brailsford from Alabama, the center. And we talked about his teammate, Jaden Roberts, the guard. Now we talk about Parker Brailsford, the center from Alabama. NFL Draft Buzz has him as their center 5, PFF as their center 4, and PFF currently has Brailsford as their 58th overall prospect, so solidly sort of in that day 2 range. NFL Draft Buzz compares him physically to a former favorite of ours here on the Air Raid Hour, Tanner Bortolini from Wisconsin. If you remember that name from our draft coverage a couple years ago. Brailsford started his career at Washington before transferring to Alabama. He was originally a 3-star recruit and became Alabama's starting center a year ago. Preseason All-American recognition for multiple outlet spots on the Remington Trophy, Lombardi Award, Outland Trophy watch lists. He's positioned himself as one of the premium center prospects in this draft. In a draft class that, to be frank, like we're going through these names, it needs some more reliable interior line talent in the class. So Brailsford's returning for 2025. He's going to apparently add weight. He is a really thoughtful guy, good football IQ, shows some pretty good self-awareness on sort of where he needs to improve in his game. And so certainly a guy to keep an eye on as we head into this college football season. Some other centers that could be of interest that we don't have a deep dive on, but just to keep your eyes on: Logan Jones from Iowa, Bryce Foster from Kansas, Connor Tollison from Mizzou. Other guards: Joshua Braun from Kentucky. Obviously, the Bills went ham on Kentucky the last couple of years in the draft between Davis, Hairston, Dion Walker. So certainly can't rule out any players from Kentucky. So you got Joshua Braun there, Davion Carter from Texas Tech, Wendell Moe Jr. from Tennessee, Chase Basantis from Texas A&M, and DJ Campbell from Texas, along with Micah Morris from Georgia. Some other names to keep an eye on as well. And look, I know we're talking 2026 offensive line prospects in the middle of June 2025. So look, I know we're in the drolls of the summer, but when we come back to our draft prep, starting next year, we can go back to some of these discussions we had this summer as we started to kind of contrast some of these prospects against the Bills' contract situations at these position groups. And that was kind of the point of this series as we continue to go through, taking a quick look ahead. We've already kind of talked about the 2025 offseason at length. We've got a few weeks now before training camp really kicks off. And so we've got a few weeks here to kind of really talk about these types of things before our summer break. That's just kind of the direction we're going with for these summer shows. And if people like them, we're going to kind of do it again next year. So it's been fun. And I think, like we've said in the comments section, we're going to try to wrap up the summer sounding series with wide receiver next week. Talk about 8 to 10 wide receivers to keep our eyes on in college football for the 2025 season. But that should just about wrap up our offensive line show for tonight. A good 40-minute show tonight for you all, riding solo again. Hopefully Judge will be back next week, get his computer back, and some of the players already on a roster may emerge as well, as Music Blogger says. And of course, that's always the hope, right? To kind of try to alleviate the need or the pressure to take from a certain position group. You hope the guys you have there that have been in development do take that step. We've seen that happen with guys like Vandemark and Alec Anderson. Maybe that happens again. Chase Lunt, again, an interesting prospect at the tackle position. We'll see if Alec Anderson can maybe make some hay. Maybe he's the heir apparent at the left guard position. Honestly, I said last year during the 2024 preview, that 2024 training camp preview, that was like, could Alec Anderson push David Edwards? That didn't happen, but maybe that's the plan for the Bills beyond 2025 at the left guard spot, but center remains a question mark, I think. We know they drafted Cedric Van Granger, but what are their real plans for him? So a lot still to be worked out for that Bills interior offensive line. Didn't need to cover tackle tonight. I don't think that position seems pretty well established. And obviously the Bills have Dawkins and Brown under term together for at least a few more years beyond 2025. So that position, the tackle positions, are in good shape for the Bills right now. So that just about does it for us tonight. I want to thank you all for joining me. For those in the comment section, especially RJ, Music Blogger, Ralph Wilson, and Eric, who says hit the like button. And I would truly appreciate that from you guys. Especially during the summer when it's easy to kind of tune out certain coverage and just kind of, I do appreciate everyone who's in here tonight talking offensive line in the middle of the summer. So I do appreciate that. RJ says the backups at OT are even solid. They did a good job with the O-line keeping it sustainable. Yes, they did. And really, really nice job. I think it's maybe the best position group. We have obviously the infamous Wyatt Teller trade, but to be fair, the Bills have really done a good job at swinging and getting some hits on the offensive line. Didn't really work out with Tommy Doyle, injuries and other things, but it did really work out with Spencer Brown. It has worked out with Osiris Torrance so far. The signing of Connor McGovern and in the past Mitch Morse proved super, super fruitful. So they've done a good job overall by and large. So appreciate that. Yes, I know. Imagine if we had Teller on this offensive line, we would be looking really good. So we're past that. I'm not going to worry about it too much anymore, but it is fun to think about what could have been. So thank you all tonight for joining in. Great point, Ralph Wilson Sr. Best position coach, Aaron Kromer. Took a year or so for it to really get rolling with him, but once it got rolling, man, that really turned out to be one of the gems of this staff. Obviously well regarded across the league, but really a gem of this staff. And so can't say enough about the job that Aaron Kromer has done. So offensive line, we'll see how it plays out in 2026. But for now, we're thankful that we have a solid looking line in place for the 2025 season. And we'll continue to kind of monitor that as we move forward here, about a month away from training camp. So thank you all again for joining me tonight. Really appreciated the comments, and hopefully we'll have Judge back next week. And until then, I have to say, go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!